The hidden history of Xerxes I, the great king of the Persian Empire. Born to rule, bred for vengeance. He wasn't just a king, he was an empire in motion. But what made Xerxes I gamble everything for a Greek dream? From epic succession drama to a royal marriage loaded with schemes, from tantrum-throwing rebellions in Egypt and Babylon to the infamous Million-Man March, this is not the Xerxes from your schoolbooks. He waited 4 years. But why? He faced fire at Thermopylae. But how did Greece hold back an empire? Was Xerxes a misunderstood mastermind? Or a glorified tyrant with great PR? Dive into a story of power, pride, and a king who dared to rewrite history. Get ready for espionage, elite warriors, broken dreams, and one colossal mistake that changed the ancient world forever. Subscribe now, turn on notifications, and don't miss a single twist in this epic saga. It's not just history, it's empire in high definition. Long before Xerxes I ever donned the crown, the Persian Empire was already flexing its muscles across 3 continents. His father, Darius the Great, ruled from 522 to 486 BC and was the empire's administrative genius. Think of him as the CEO of Persia Inc., with a flair for tax codes and palace construction. But Darius had one Achilles heel: Greece. Now, Xerxes wasn't just born into royalty, he was practically distilled from it. His mother, Atassa, was the daughter of Cyrus the Great, the founder of the Achaemenid Empire. That made Xerxes the imperial equivalent of a double espresso: strong, bold, and with a legacy that could keep you up at night. Around 510 BC, Darius had a dream: to add Greece to his empire's portfolio. But the Greeks weren't exactly thrilled about becoming Persian subsidiaries. In 490 BC, Darius launched a full-scale invasion, culminating in the Battle of Marathon, a clash that would become the stuff of legend. Location: a flat plain near the Aegean Sea, perfect for Persian cavalry. Or so they thought. Persian forces, 25,000 infantry, 1,000 cavalry, and a whole lot of confidence. Greek forces, 10,000 Athenians plus 1,000 Plataeans. No cavalry, no archers, just spears, shields, and sheer stubbornness. Miltiades, the Greek general, pulled a tactical rabbit out of his helmet. He thinned the center of his line and reinforced the flanks. When the Persians charged, they broke through the center, only to be enveloped by the Greek wings. It was a classic pincer move, and it worked like a charm. Result: Persians, 6,400 dead. Greeks, 192 dead. Darius, embarrassed, enraged, and ready for revenge. When Darius died in 486 BC, the throne didn't automatically go to his eldest son, Artaxerxes, sometimes called Arazon. Why? Because Artaxerxes was born before Darius became king, and his mother was a commoner. In royal politics, that's like showing up to a board meeting in flip-flops. Xerxes, on the other hand, was born in the purple, after Darius had ascended the throne, and his mother was Atassa, daughter of Cyrus the Great. That gave him a pedigree so pure it practically sparkled. With Atassa's influence and a little help from the exiled Spartan king Demaratus, Xerxes was crowned between October and December of 486 BC. He was about 32 years old, and the empire was his to command. Xerxes married Amestris, daughter of Otanes, a powerful noble. Together, they had several children, including Darius, not to be confused with Grandpa Darius, Hystaspes, Artaxerxes I, who would later succeed him, Amytas and Rhodogun, daughters with political marriages of their own. But Xerxes wasn't exactly a model husband. According to Herodotus, he had a wandering eye and a flair for scandal. His pursuit of his brother's wife and daughter led to a family drama so intense it could have been a Netflix series. Xerxes was ambitious, charismatic, and deeply invested in his divine right to rule. He believed Ahura Mazda had chosen him to lead, and he took that seriously. But he also had a temper. When a storm destroyed his pontoon bridges across the Hellespont, he famously ordered his men to whip the sea and throw shackles into it. Yes, he punished the ocean. When Xerxes I inherited the Persian throne in 486 BC, he didn't just get a fancy title and a palace with golden toilets. Okay, maybe not golden toilets, but definitely golden everything else. He also inherited a to-do list longer than the royal road. At the top, Egypt, the empire's rebellious southern cousin. Egypt had been throwing a royal tantrum ever since Darius first tried to squeeze it like a lemon. High taxes, forced labor, and the deportation of skilled craftsmen to build Persian palaces. Imagine being a master sculptor in Thebes and suddenly getting a one-way ticket to Susa to carve lion paws for Xerxes' throne. Not exactly a dream gig. So in January 484 BC, Xerxes rolled into Egypt like a thunderstorm in silk robes. He crushed the revolt with a military campaign that was swift, brutal, and effective. To keep the peace, he appointed his brother Achaemenes, not Ames, close but history's picky, as satrap of Egypt, a move that said, "Behave, or Big Bro will be back." No sooner had Xerxes unpacked his victory sandals than Babylon decided it wanted in on the rebellion action. But Babylon wasn't just any city, it was the ancient jewel of Mesopotamia, a place so prestigious that Persian kings used to call themselves King of Babylon as a badge of honor. But Xerxes? He was having none of it. He ditched the title like last season's fashion and declared himself King of the Persians and the Medes. Translation: Babylon, you're not that special. This royal snub, combined with increased taxes and the empire's general "we own you" attitude, sparked two revolts in 484 BC. The first was led by Bel-Shammani, who lasted about as long as a Babylonian summer breeze. The second, more serious uprising was led by Shamash-Ariba, who actually managed to seize Babylon and declare himself king. But Xerxes wasn't about to let a rebel wear his crown. He launched a long siege, eventually retaking the city. And then, he went full scorched earth mode. Babylon's walls torn down, temples damaged. The golden statue of Marduk, Babylon's chief deity, melted down like a chocolate bunny in the desert sun. Why? Because Marduk's statue was central to Babylonian kingship rituals. Without it, no one could take the hand of Marduk and be crowned king. Xerxes didn't just punish Babylon, he obliterated its spiritual legitimacy. With Egypt pacified and Babylon humbled, Xerxes turned his gaze westward. When Xerxes I inherited the Persian throne in 486 BC, he didn't just get a crown, he got a vendetta. His father, Darius the Great, had tried to conquer Greece and got a humiliating beatdown at the Battle of Marathon. Xerxes wasn't about to let that slide, so he did what any self-respecting god-king would do. He spent 4 years preparing the greatest invasion force the ancient world had ever seen. Why 4 years? To build pontoon bridges across the Hellespont, because boats were too basic. To dig a canal through Mount Athos, because sailing around it was for amateurs. To gather troops from every corner of his empire, from India to Egypt, Babylon to Bactria. To stockpile enough food, weapons, and gold to make even the gods jealous. Herodotus claimed Xerxes had over 1 million men. Modern historians roll their eyes and say it was probably closer to 200,000 to 300,000. But hey, who's counting when you've got 10,000 immortals leading the charge? Who were they? A hand-picked unit of 10,000 warriors who served as both royal bodyguards and shock troops. Why immortal? Because every time one died, another was instantly slotted in, like a human USB replacement. Training. From childhood, they were drilled in archery, spear combat, and psychological warfare. They were the best of the best, Persians, Medes, and Elamites. Weapons, bows, slings, short spears, swords, and scale armor that shimmered like fish scales. Battle style, precision, discipline, and overwhelming force. They didn't just fight, they performed. In spring of 480 BC, Xerxes left Sardis with his mega army and crossed into Europe via his floating bridges. The march was a logistical nightmare. Obstacles faced, rivers drank dry by thirsty soldiers, mountains carved open for canals, supply lines stretched across continents, local Greek cities trembling in fear or switching sides. But Xerxes was undeterred. He had revenge, glory, and Dad's legacy to fulfill. Xerxes arrived at Thermopylae, a narrow pass between mountain and sea, perfect for a small force to hold off a massive army. Enter Leonidas I, king of Sparta, with 300 Spartans, 700 Thespians, and a few thousand other Greeks. He thought the Greeks would flee. They didn't. He thought his numbers would crush them. They didn't. He sent wave after wave of troops, including the immortals, and watched them get bodied by a wall of bronze and muscle. Day 1, Persian frontal assault fails. Greeks hold the line. Day 2, immortals sent in. They get immortalized in failure. Day 3, a Greek traitor named Ephialtes, not Apelles, tells Xerxes about a secret mountain path 10. Hydarnes leads a detachment around the pass. Leonidas, realizing they're surrounded, dismisses most of the army. He and his Spartans stay behind to fight to the death. They do, and they take thousands of Persians with them. With Thermopylae breached, Xerxes marches into Athens, but surprise, the Athenians had already evacuated to Salamis. What Xerxes found? A few stubborn defenders on the Acropolis. What he did? Burned the city, torched the temples, melted down sacred statues, left nothing but ash and echoes 13. It was vengeance for Marathon. It was a message to Greece, bow or burn. By September 480 BC, Xerxes I, the Persian god-king with a flair for drama and a taste for conquest, had already torched Athens and strutted through northern Greece like he owned the place. But he wasn't satisfied. He wanted a decisive naval victory. A knockout punch to end the Greek resistance once and for all. Enter Themistocles, the Athenian general with the brain of a chess master and the charm of a con artist. Though his city had been burned, his spirit was anything but. He saw Xerxes' hunger for glory and thought, perfect, let's feed him a banquet of lies. Themistocles sent his servant Sisinus to Xerxes with a juicy tale. The Greek alliance was crumbling, the commanders were bickering, and the fleet was planning to flee Salamis under cover of night. Oh, and by the way, the Athenians were totally ready to surrender if their allies got crushed. Xerxes, who had the strategic patience of a toddler in a candy store, took the bait. He ordered his fleet to blockade the straits of Salamis, thinking he'd trap the Greeks and win the war before breakfast. Meanwhile, Themistocles was rubbing his hands like a villain in a toga. His plan had two brilliant objectives: lure the Persian fleet into the narrow straits where their numbers would be a liability, exploit Greek naval agility, especially the maneuverability of their triremes, in tight quarters. At dawn, the Persian fleet surged into the straits like a tidal wave of bronze and arrogance. But the Greeks were ready. Their ships, smaller and faster, darted between the lumbering Persian vessels, ramming hulls and boarding decks like pirates with a vendetta. The Persian numerical advantage? Useless. Their ships collided with each other, their formations broke down, and their commanders couldn't even shout orders over the chaos. Themistocles' trap had sprung, and it was glorious. Xerxes watched the carnage from a golden throne on a hillside, probably wondering if he could fire Poseidon for poor performance. His fleet was decimated, his pride wounded, and his dreams of Greek domination sinking faster than his ships. Fearing the Greeks might destroy the pontoon bridges over the Hellespont, Xerxes made a strategic retreat. He left his general Mardonius behind with a chunk of the army and returned to Susa, his capital, to lick his wounds and commission some very angry statues. Though the Battle of Salamis was a turning point, it wasn't the end. Mardonius would continue the fight, and the Persians still held parts of Greece. But the myth of Persian invincibility had shattered. Themistocles, meanwhile, went from that guy who lost his city to the man who saved Greece with a lie. After the naval disaster at Salamis, Xerxes I, once the glittering god-king of Persia, found himself in a bit of a pickle. His fleet was in tatters, his pride was bruised, and the Greeks were proving annoyingly resilient. But all was not lost. Much of mainland Greece was still under Persian control, and the colossal Persian land army stood firm like a wall of bronze and silk. So what did Xerxes do? He pulled a classic royal move: delegation. He handed the reins to his cousin and trusted General Mardonius, a man with enough military swagger to make even Spartan spears tremble. Xerxes retreated to Asia, likely muttering, "You've got this, cousin," while secretly hoping Mardonius would deliver the knockout blow. Mardonius, ever the optimist, tried diplomacy first. He believed the Greek alliance, fractured between Athens and Sparta, could be bribed, flattered, or sweet-talked into submission. Spoiler alert, they couldn't. The Greeks, led by Pausanias of Sparta, were not in the mood for Persian charm. They wanted freedom, not flattery. So Mardonius, realizing that words wouldn't win the war, turned to what Persians did best: battle. In 479 BC, the two forces clashed at Plataea. Mardonius, confident and commanding, faced off against a Greek army that was smaller but tactically brilliant. The Greeks used their terrain, their phalanx formations, and their sheer stubbornness to devastating effect. Mardonius was killed in battle, and with him died Persia's last hope of conquering Greece. The remaining Persian troops, now leaderless and demoralized, faced unsanitary conditions, starvation, and disease outbreaks like dysentery, which turned their camp into a tragic mess of misery. Xerxes, having crossed the Hellespont back to Sardis, was greeted not by victory parades, but by the ghost of his once mighty army. His grand expedition had become a debacle, a cautionary tale of hubris and overreach. In 466 BC, the Greeks, now emboldened, launched a counter-offensive to liberate Greek settlements in Asia Minor. Enter Cimon, the Athenian commander with a flair for dramatic victories. At the Battle of the Eurymedon, Cimon pulled off a double whammy. First, he wrecked the Persian fleet. Then, he defeated the Persian ground forces on the beach. On the same day. It was a landmark moment that shattered Persian influence in the region and cemented Greek autonomy. With dreams of Greek domination dashed, Xerxes turned inward. He poured his energy and gold into monumental projects. He expanded Persepolis with palaces and halls that rivaled Olympus. He maintained and improved the royal road, the empire's communications superhighway. He developed cities like Susa and Persepolis into imperial jewels. But all this grandeur came at a cost. To fund his architectural ambitions, Xerxes imposed heavy taxes across the empire. The provinces groaned under the weight of levies and tributes. The people, already bitter from the failed Greek campaign, now faced financial ruin. The result? Widespread unrest. The empire's subjects were no longer dazzled by golden columns, they were furious about empty purses. It was August 465 BC, and the Persian Empire, once a roaring lion stretching from the Nile to the Indus, was about to get a dagger to the heart. King Xerxes I, the man who had whipped the sea and burned Athens, was lounging in his palace, likely admiring his latest monument or plotting another tax hike. But behind the silk curtains and golden goblets, a storm was brewing. Enter Artabanus, commander of the royal bodyguard. A man with access, ambition, and apparently zero chill. He wasn't just a glorified bouncer. He was a political heavyweight in the Persian court. And he had a plan that would make even Machiavelli blush. According to Aristotle, Artabanus didn't just go for the king, he started with Crown Prince Darius, Xerxes' eldest son too. Why? Because Artabanus feared Darius would uncover his schemes and retaliate, so he struck first, eliminating the heir in a quiet, calculated move. Then, with Darius out of the way, Artabanus turned his blade on Xerxes himself too. Some sources say he did it with help from a eunuch named Aspamytres, who controlled access to the king's bedchamber. Others claim Artabanus hid in the shadows and personally delivered the fatal blow won. Either way, the mighty Xerxes, once the terror of Greece, was now a corpse in his own palace. Now comes the twist worthy of a Netflix thriller. Artabanus, ever the schemer, convinced Artaxerxes, Xerxes' third son, that his brother Darius had murdered their father too. Artaxerxes, grief-stricken and furious, executed Darius without question. But the truth has a nasty habit of surfacing. When Artaxerxes discovered the real plot, that Artabanus had orchestrated both murders, he flipped the royal switch. Artabanus and his sons were executed in a blaze of vengeance too. Some say Artaxerxes personally ran Artabanus through with a sword. Others claim it was a surprise ambush. Either way, the usurper's reign lasted mere months before his blood joined Xerxes on the palace floor. Xerxes' death didn't just shake the palace, it rattled the empire. The Achaemenid dynasty, already strained by failed campaigns and heavy taxation, now faced internal chaos. The Greeks, who had long painted Xerxes as a cruel, arrogant tyrant, rejoiced. Herodotus and other Greek historians wasted no ink in portraying him as a megalomaniac who thought he could command nature itself. Unlike his predecessors Cyrus the Great and Darius I, who were often admired, even by Greek writers, Xerxes became the poster child for Persian hubris. Fast forward a century. Alexander the Great, the golden-haired conqueror of Macedonia, had a score to settle. Xerxes had sacked Athens, and Alexander wasn't about to let that slide. When he reached Persepolis, the jewel of the Persian Empire, he torched Xerxes' palace in a symbolic act of revenge. It wasn't just fire, it was history burning. Xerxes left behind a complex legacy. He was a builder of wonders, a commander of legions, and a man who dared to challenge Greece. But he was also a ruler whose ambition outpaced his wisdom, whose empire cracked under the weight of his monuments and military failures. And in the end, it wasn't the Greeks who toppled him. It was his own court, his own blood, and a dagger in the dark. Coming up next, Leonidas I, Spartan warrior king. He led 300 men into the jaws of death and defied an empire. Why did Leonidas choose to stand when others fled? How did Sparta become the cradle of unshakable courage? What was the true cost of heroism at Thermopylae? This isn't just legend, it's legacy. Subscribe now and turn on notifications so you don't miss the moment when valor meets destiny. Every roar of battle, every heartbeat of resistance, it's all here.